Hey, folks, it's Barry Chamish. That means it's Tuesday at 6 o'clock. You knew that. I've got, well, you can't have a better show than last week, but I got a good one. My first guest is Charles Stone. For the time being, we're going to say a nuclear expert. We'll let him plug himself a little late. Charles, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Barry.
Nice to hear from you.
Sure.
All righty. I went over your notes, so let's go into it.
Okay.
Talking about an atomic catastrophe used, well, what you claim is there are a long series of atomic cover-ups facilitated by the U.S. government. What do you mean?
Well, I'm just saying that these are factual, historical topics that are well documented and known. They aren't covered by the mainstream media, many of them aren't. They're covered but they're there if you want to find them. I think that...
For a reason, just expand a bit. What atomic cover-ups?
Well, these go back to, the ones I'm covering go back to the World War II era. And involve first one involves the suppression of advanced German and Japanese atomic development during the 1930s and 40s. This is very well documented from books from Japan, the United States, Germany, Italy, and UK. And there's a far different story than the story we've been told about how the...
I know, but the heavy water from Norway incident or whatever, I know they were trying to get heavy water. But you can expand a bit.
Right. We believe that the German atomic program was much more advanced, and that it did produce fissile material, and it did produce atomic devices that were tested, and these were tested before the U.S. test in Alamogordo. And it's all been suppressed because that was the atomic race and so forth, that other countries won the atomic race, but the U.S. won the war, so the U.S. made the history, The U.S. government made the history.
Clearly, by the way, heavy water's water with deuterium for us unscientific people is needed. Right. And it was produced in Norway, and it was stopped. You don't want to go on from there?
Well, we believe that there were other sites in which, in Germany, that there were at least 5 separate programs in Germany for atomic development. And the main site was in Poland at Auschwitz III. That there was a plant there that used more electricity than the city of Berlin used, and it never produced a single. It was supposed to produce artificial rubber. It never produced any rubber at all. And we believe this was used as the atomic as their main atomic site to produce fissile material.
Why not say so?
What?
I mean, why keep that hidden?
Well, I don't know why the government has kept that hidden, because they don't want to admit that someone else got it before them. It's a very sensitive site, being at Auschwitz, and someone must have known something about it for many years. I've noticed over the years, over the past couple of years, that the diagrams and so forth have been found of Auschwitz, but those were never made public. I've noticed at least 1 or 2 occasions I saw it in the media, and then you never heard anything more about it. But there's a reason why, to keep this silent and to keep the historical story going.
Well, I would assume they got German scientists on their side afterwards. I suppose that's why you cover it up.
I think they were either, some of the German scientists were actually shot when during the war. There were, and the ones that survived were held in it was a famous interrogation, farm hall interrogation, and I think they were all given the They got the idea that they were not supposed to talk about really what really happened, and it'd be good for their health and good for the future health of German science, and
Yes.
they all kind of and most of them have maintained that silence. There's been actually from the U.S. archives and from the Soviet archives is where most of the information came from. That there are a few places where the people who did the classification work missed the documentation, and there was obvious documentation about the German atomic program, and obvious at least two known tests. One was in the Baltic in the fall of 1944, and it gives a description of an explosion that only could be an atomic explosion. And it was reviewed by some top naval intelligence people, and it was it was judged to be a true it was judged to be true by top naval intelligence analysts at that time, and it was called the Zinser report. And there was also a test of a smaller device in central Germany on a former Army proving ground area, or former Army barracks area in central Germany, a smaller device near Erdrich, Germany.
Well, if they exploded two devices, why didn't they just hold the United States for ransom? I mean, you could drop it on London.
I think that the idea was of the Battle of the Bulge. It was kind of suicidal battle for Germany, or appeared to be. But had the German assault been successful, they were trying to recapture Antwerp. And had the Battle of the Bulge been successful, there were submarines equipped with that could launch V2 weapons and so forth that were ready to go. And had they made it to Antwerp, so they could have launched their atomic weapons on Britain. I'm sure they would have tried to blackmail or negotiate some sort of negotiated peace that late in the war, and that's why Adolf Hitler was
delivery system.
Well, they did have a delivery system. They had the V2. And it may not have been that good of a system. It may not have been that. It may not have been the weapons that may have been too big to fit in a V2. I'm not sure why it was done, but we do know that was the real plan of the Battle of the Bulge. That was a desperation effort to recapture Antwerp, and then to use that to negotiate some sort of peace settlement, threatening to rain some atomic devices on the United Kingdom.
That's a good alter history.
Sure. Well, I think it was a real plan, but fortunately, it didn't get that far. But it was the Battle of the Bulge had the German armored forces gone up on top of the hills rather than down in the valleys. They'd gone up the top of Elsenborn Ridge. And if they came very close to a major fuel depot in that area, it might have made it, and so it was closer than you might think,
Well, I would say for an atomic cover-up, how a backwards country like Russia, well, 48 they got their first nuke, but in 50 they got a hydrogen bomb before America. So there's got to be a story behind that. Really, that required very advanced technology, which in theory they didn't have.
Well, the Russians did capture a number of German scientists who were very advanced. One of the most famous ones was Manfred von Ardenne. He was the real Red Baron. He was a real baron, and he went with the Soviets, with East Germany, so he was labeled as the Red Baron. He carried out advanced technology development in East Germany in a number of areas for decades afterwards. He lived up into the 1990s, And there were other scientists that were captured. There was technology. We don't know exactly what technology, at least I don't know exactly what the
No,
Soviets
you're
captured.
describing a very possible scenario here. I mean, if you get East
And,
Germany, you get some, you know, benefits from it. That,
right. Well, there were. Now, keep in mind that the Soviet Union was always very strong in physics and nuclear physics. It still is very strong in that area. And in a
nobody knew
theoretical
about
topic of it,
atomic bombs, at least
there there
until
there
August
there were
8th.
Soviets. The Soviets had intercepted all of our intelligence. They knew what we were doing and everything. They, in fact, Stalin at one of the, I think at Yalta or something like that. I think he told Roosevelt, we liked it better when you used those old terms. There was a intelligence term they used. I'm trying to think of the name of what it was called right now, but we liked that one better. But the Soviets essentially had intercepted much of the atomic intelligence. There were atomic spies in the U.S. program and so forth.
Yeah, there was a Jewish couple in New York that got really blamed, and now there's all kinds of documents coming out that kind of say they were framed.
Well, I don't know exactly if they were framed or not. They were involved in some sort of atomic espionage. Whether it was that important what they found. There were also a couple. There was one or two people at Los Alamos that were also involved with them or with Soviet espionage. We still don't know all the penetrations that may have been made. So it's still an open story what really happened. And again, there was Klaus Fuchs was a German spy in the atomic program and came from the British program, was definitely heavily involved in all that.
That's a known, yes.
And the Soviets had some very good atomic scientists of their own. There was a Professor Kepisa, and other ones that were, the theoretical topics like that, the Russians are very good in,
Well, the Klaus Fuchs, he actually lived the rest of his life in Russia.
Right.
All right. There's a book in here. There really is, with a different theme. But, yeah, it's starting to coalesce for me, okay? Now, look, you turned the background, and I admit there's a background into the current controversy about the Iran deal. And, well, you just write to me it's false or obvious, no verification, and so forth. What is wrong with this deal?
Well, I think there's almost everything about it is wrong. So the first and most important part is it can't be verified. And even though in theory the International Atomic Energy Commission can check these sites, it's a very cumbersome process for them to do that. For the samples, they have to rely on the Iranian government to provide the samples for them. Then the second most dangerous part of it is that any windfall profits that come from the oil that the Iranians sell from once the embargo is broken and all these countries are eager to buy their low cost oil, that will be funneled back into terrorist activities with Hamas and so forth. And the Iranians have shown to be very efficient and capable of promoting terrorist activities in the Middle East.
Well,
an area that's already very unstable, and
yeah.
And now it's the third part that's also, these are all equally dangerous, is that it's ignited an atomic race in the Middle East. That Saudi Arabia has access to atomic bombs through Pakistan. There's even some people have even mentioned that some of the Gulf states may try to have their own or buy devices. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen there, but it's a very destabilizing agreement that's guaranteed to cause serious problems in not so long run. And in the long run, it's even more dangerous because Iran can pretty much do what they want to do, especially when the agreement expires in 10 years from now.
That's the part that bothers me a lot.
Yeah, and the fact that we've known for a long time that the goal of the people that are behind all these, let's say the powers to be, or whatever you want to call them, that there's an effort to create increasing instability in the Middle East, and eventually set off.
Worry about that.
And eventually set off an atomic device there in one of the countries. It could be in Israel, it could be in Iran, could be. But and the idea is that this will be used as an excuse to declare a worldwide government, a worldwide fascist state.
Well,
and that's
okay.
That's what many people have thought, and many people think, and I think that's certainly, we don't have any proof that that's actually going to happen, but it's certainly all the factors are lining up for it to happen.
I think we're teetering on the edge here.
Yeah,
right?
well, yeah, sure, yeah.
Look, it was, I guess, the 60s. There was a mini atomic. Well, India and Pakistan set up bombs. That went away pretty quickly, but I assume they both know how to make them.
Well, yeah, both India and Pakistan have the atomic bomb. The Saudi government helped subsidize the Pakistan program, and the U.S. government kind of let it happen. There were a lot of ways that could have been stopped relatively easily, but it wasn't. With that clever guy, Dr. Khan, he conned everybody, so to speak.
Well, it didn't. Look, when you have India and Pakistan who don't get along that well, both set up bombs, it should have been scarier, but it died off. You don't hear about it.
Well, yeah, it was again. But I think now that it's in the Middle East, this is the most dangerous one. In addition to North Korea. Now, North Korea was also allowed to develop an atomic device under a similar accord that was put in place in the 1990s. And guess who was one of the key players in putting that all together back in the 1990s?
I don't know the answer. I can't guess.
Secretary Kerry, the same person who negotiated the current agreement with Iran. John Kerry was the key.
You're saying he's involved in the North Korean atomic program?
No, he was involved in setting up the agreement that allowed the North Koreans to develop an atomic device. In other words,
that's pretty serious.
Yeah, his framework didn't work. They made a big deal about the framework and all that stuff.
It did work. This is what bothers me about the Iran agreement. It's really so bad. It truly is.
Yeah, sure it is. Yeah,
so
it's
you're thinking
quite.
To yourself, if he set up North Korea's program, heck, this is right in line with his agenda.
Well, I think that North Korea was allowed to go forward, and they've developed an atomic device. They've developed intercontinental ballistic missiles, and who knows what Mr. Kim will do there? He's really pretty. I mean, the governance of that country is extremely weird, and so you don't know what they'll do. I mean, compared to the Iranians are pretty trustworthy compared to him, But
why didn't they just buy? If they're so interested in having nuclear weapons, why didn't they just buy them from North Korea? Certainly, they need the money, and Iran's got money. And why this trouble?
Well, that was the idea that back during the Clinton years, North Korea opened up a huge uranium mine. It was the richest uranium mine ever found in the world. It was found during the World War II era by Belgium and it's in the Congo. There were 6,000 miners working this mine. It was mentioned, if you kept a very close watch in the media, it was mentioned a few places, but it was not mentioned very much in the media. And this was intended to supply all the countries with the best fissile material there is out there, and
Well,
or the best uranium ore.
I know they can mine this stuff, but you're saying it was sent in the wrong direction.
Well, but the thing is that, and also North Korea was going to help all these countries with technical development. They were going to help them with rocket development and so forth. And they were well on the way to doing that during the Clinton years when George Bush came into office, and he was able to at least stop some of that, even though he carried out
he was a good guy? All right.
Well,
what the heck?
I think he was able to stop certain aspects of it. Of course, he really destroyed his presidency pursuing the atomic program in Iraq, the false intelligence they got, and so forth. But there actually were real uranium mines in Africa, a huge one that was very important that had been supplying these or was set up to supply, Iran, Pakistan, North Korea, Iraq, Libya, all those countries with fissile material. And this is the best fissile ore that's ever been found. And they were also going to provide technical help and so forth, and for the atomic part and for the rocket part. So it was a very dangerous, they were going forward in a very dangerous way if there hadn't been some efforts to stop it. So the Bush administration was at least successful in that area.
Pardon me for being a cynic, but you're comparing poo-poo and caca. I mean, I'm looking at
right. Well, I know, but see, the media only covered one part of the story. I mean, the Bush administration was misled by the neoconservatives here in Washington and other people into the Iraq War, and then that futile search for the atomic materials in Iraq. Now, they did find an atomic site in Libya.
In Iraq of atomic energy.
Yeah, but they did find an atomic site in Libya that was an underground site that was for Iraq. So it wasn't exactly, there was nothing, but it was in Libya rather than Iraq. But it was like
soldiers.
Yes, I know it. Yes, I know it was. It was certainly a effort that I had. The initial assault was very successful. Had that been followed up with a better approach, we might have a much more stable Mideast now. But it seems like all these.
I'm going to hit you in the next half hour. We take a little break, but I'm going to get you to go deeper. You're a little reluctant, and I'm going to force you to start talking about what a Tavistock president is and why Obama is one and Bush isn't one and so forth. But what can you say? When it comes to the Middle East, go find one spot that's peaceful right now. Okay. Now, look, you have 3 minutes to prepare this business of what Tavistock was and why Obama is following their agenda, and you're going to awaken my listeners. Don't run away. We come back in 3 minutes. Folks, this is Barry Chamish. Charles Stone is our guest. You too, 3 minutes. Come back.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The Greatest Prophecy DVD from Cross the Border Productions. Embrace the little-known but greatest prophecy given by the great high priest. The pre-incarnate Messiah reveals God's once secret plan for mankind. Believe it. Behold, the end times in Daniel chapter 2, because
the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure.
Silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Hey, folks. Now, for those who listened to last week's show, well, including Jim and Betty, I just spoke to them from Cyprus. He's on the third listen, all right? That was about Gaza and what's coming up. You know what? My book, Bye Bye Gaza, is at lulu.com. That's www.lulu.com. Right in my last name in the search box, Chamish, Chamish. David Samron is still putting up my website, www.barrychamish.com. All right, Charles, plug yourself.
Okay. You want to hear my take on President Obama and
I want
Tavistock?
people to get a hold of you.
Okay. I'm at my website is www.washingtontiger.weebly.com.
Oh, you have to actually do that again, but you have to spell.
Sure.
I've never heard of Weebly.
Weebly, it's www.washingtontiger.weebly is WEEBLY.com.
Folks, if you missed that, we're archived for a week at libertyarchives.com. That's a tough address. I want you to know that. But you're actually being really very, very, how should I say this? It's fitting into my reality, a lot of what you're saying. Now, what you're saying is Obama is the second Tavistock president. First of all, who was the first?
The first Tavistock president was Jimmy Carter. And he was actually chosen by a key Tavistock agent here in the United States. And because he'd been through the Navy mind control training program, he was a naval officer in the nuclear submarine branch. And the head of that branch, Admiral Rickover, required all of his officers to, and I think everybody in the program to take the Tavistock-related mind control training program. And
you have to expand on Tavistock. I know.
Okay. Tavistock Tavistock was originally set up to help and study the British soldiers that survived World War I with shell shock. This was in the 1920s. And then over the years, especially in the 30s, and it became a much darker type of situation. And it got into mind control and a lot of other things. I should mention that the original Tavistock was a British Army PSYOPs training center in Devon. And there was a young German soldier or someone who became a soldier in World War I who who was indoctrinated there for at least a year.
Don't say Hitler. You're not going to say
There
Hitler,
was-
right?
Yes, I am going to say Adolf
All
Hitler.
right.
Yes.
I got some problems. He would have been 16 years old.
No, he. This was in about 1912 or 1913, just
That's
before
what I'm
World
saying. He
War.
would have been about 16 years old. He fought in the
Well,
First
actually-
World War. You're right. He might have been 17.
Yeah, and so he was trained there. This is fairly well documented. And then let's go on to the 1930s. It became dark, and there were all these people who were famous people who were associated with Tavistock. In 1937, perhaps the most famous psychiatrist of them all became its director.
You're
Good old
saying
Uncle
Freud,
Sigmund,
of course.
Uncle Sigmund Freud, yep. And there was his daughter became the director for decades afterwards too. And so they basically Tavistock learned how to keep their finger on the psyche of the world. And they
And
were
you're saying
supported.
Obama is the second Tavistock president. What is expected of him?
Well, he's doing what he's actually doing is exactly what he was expected to do. You know, that he's trying to do everything he can to destroy the United States. You know, bring the United States down. I think his presidency shows all that.
Actually, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying lately, I don't know how long it's been going on, he is not the first. He's a little more obvious.
Well, he was groomed for decades for this. You understand why all his records are still private. You can't, whatever happened to, we don't know what he was doing in much of his life, and there's no proof of where he was born or anything, you know. And he was able to pass that all off. He was able to convince people that wasn't important. But let me just, everybody...
Is this Iranian deal going to pass the House? There's a lot of criticism. People are reading the fine lines, and it doesn't, I don't think it's going to pass the House.
No, I sure hope it doesn't, no. But the thing is, will they have a big enough majority to overcome a Obama veto? It depends with the Senate. The Senate is the key, and there's several senators are the key to this, including Senator Chuck Schumer from New York. And I don't know whether
he can in some way force them against their will or something, because otherwise the verification business is spreading.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very difficult to verify it with the agreement they have there now, and also there are many, practically all aspects of that agreement are very dangerous, you know.
All right,
and
so Tavistock, he's doing their agenda, which is to bring down the United States,
he's been groomed for this for decades. Now, everybody makes jokes about how much time he spends at the golf course. But, you know, what he's doing at the golf course, he's getting his instructions from Tavistock about what to do with the country, you know. He's getting his consultation on the golf course.
Don't use the 7-iron. It won't get you to the green. I mean, what's going to happen at a golf course?
Well, see, that's a place where he can do it and nobody can see or hear what he's doing. It's a very private place. That makes a lot of sense. And then the other, it's kind of a joke.
I
but then
think you're speculating. I'm going to just say this. I think the guy is just lazy and likes to play golf.
Well, that may be true also, but it's also where they give him the instructions. He gets the instructions from the Tavistock people about what to do, you know.
Well, I'm going to say that the Kerry deal, either he's the world's worst diplomat, which, by the way, maybe, but also he may be doing something incredibly rotten. And that's my take on Kerry.
Well, you know, I remember when he ran for president, I worked on the George W. Bush campaign, and we used to call him Scary Kerry back then, and at the time of that campaign 10 years ago, you know. Scary Kerry instead of Harry Kerry, Scary Kerry, yeah.
I've got to different take, and it's even worse. But let's stop at that. It's your show. Now, I'm going to give you a bunch of issues. Now, here, first of all, I got to tell you. Now, what you wrote. All right, here's what you wrote. Expose the artificial nature of the Fukushima nuclear events and the terrorist activity behind it. Now, you don't believe terrorists created a 40-foot tsunami.
Yes, I believe it was created artificially. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That the world's largest drilling ship was right at the epicenter of that earthquake just before it happened. And it's possible. I think a atomic device was inserted in the seabed and set off to create a artificial earthquake.
By who?
I don't know exactly who did it. There was, let's say, a rogue group of people at a very high level in a number of countries.
Okay, that's wide. Look,
Yeah.
I have trouble. I mean, that wasn't just a normal tsunami. It was.
No, it wasn't. And it was not a normal earthquake
mankind
either.
wanted Japan to have a nuclear accident for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, these powers to be, these behind-the-scenes power brokers that may be out in the open, but what they were doing was behind the scenes there, that they were trying to, it was done on purpose, one, to damage atomic energy. That was an accident waiting to happen. That was a very large power plant with aging technology right next to the ocean.
So they had levees of 20 feet. They were prepared for tsunamis, but not this one.
Yeah, and then the backup generators were also sabotaged.
These are major claims. Charles, these are major claims.
Well, these are. I think if you know where to look, I think if you know where to look, you can find documentation for it. That those backup generators failed, and they never should have failed, and they've been sabotaged.
Well, they were flooded.
There was a Stuxnet virus in those power plants. They found the Stuxnet virus there too. You know.
Apparently, you can't just shut off an atomic reactor. It's not a matter of a switch somewhere. It takes time.
Well, no. Those are very big and complicated mechanisms, and Japan had a very good safety record with atomic energy, as does France and other countries that use atomic energy to safely, and it can be done safely if it's done very carefully. And I think that's what the Japanese that Fukushima plant was.
Okay, I'm not sure about that, but I do know it's not over. There's
I can send you a report on the Fukushima plant which shows the seismic records and so forth. You can look at. I'll send it to you the next couple of days.
See, if you're Japan, you don't put a nuclear site beside an obvious tsunami site. I mean, that's pure stupidity. Nonetheless.
Barry, it was not a very smart place to put it, but Japan doesn't have a lot of spare land either. You know, they're very short on usable land.
40,
and so they
40 crummy feet. I mean, they put it right on the shore. Well,
I don't think it was a good idea. And again, it was an aging technology that was getting toward the end of its lifespan and so forth too. You know, but there were 5. It was the biggest. I think it's the biggest. It was the biggest site in Japan. You know.
What I've been reading is they sort of have it under control, but it's not over yet. And there's stuff
a big part of the problem is they had to store the used plutonium on the site, and that's a big problem. Is getting rid of the plutonium that's around these destroyed and damaged plants, and And I believe, though, I haven't checked it recently, but again, there were the fires that continued there and all sorts of problems.
Yeah.
It was a really big time mess, you know.
Yeah, I've been reading about leaks and stuff.
And so who knows how many people died? At least 15,000 people died with it.
Well, that was from the tsunami.
Yeah, right. And so it was a highly suspect situation, and maybe the Japanese leadership is afraid to talk about it, and for various reasons. But I think they know exactly what would happen there. You know.
I would assume there's a story we haven't been told. All right.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you there. But again, 40-foot tsunami. How can you create a 40-foot tsunami? I mean, that's
with a large atomic device in the seabed. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have to go to the fault, and you got to get the whole fault to slip. And not slip a little, slip really. It's got to be miles and miles of slippage. I don't know if people can do
well.
things.
Well, there was the world's largest drilling ship was right above the epicenter of all that for some time before the tsunami occurred.
All righty. We'll leave this one up in the air. And people,
sure.
I'm going to give you another shot. Try and tell people slowly how they can get a hold of you.
Well, I'm at www.washingtontiger.weebly.com. Weebly, WEEBLY.com.
All right, folks, you want to read more about this?
And you can reach me. You can reach me by email at dcchuck47@gmail.com.
Say it again slowly. Spell it even.
dcchuck47@gmail.com.
All right. Anyone who wants to know more, I assume, will contact Chuck. Charles is how I know you, but Chuck it is. Now, look, next claim. You're writing. Las Vegas is America's fallout capital. Now, I know Nevada, if you made a movie and you were John Wayne and watched an event, you had all kinds of poisoning. Are you talking about that?
Yes, it was the test site is right outside of Las Vegas, where most of those tests were done. It's also very near to Area 51 and so forth, too.
But over time, if you go to Las Vegas, you're not in any danger of radiation, are you?
No, but you might be in danger of losing some of your money, though.
I agree. I don't think it's America's. I think it may have been I don't even think there was a casino when they were experimenting. And I know you put on sunglasses and watched atomic things going off in the air, and you got sick afterwards.
Well, there were casinos there back in the 1940s during the World War II era. And in fact, the friend of one of my dad's Army buddies owned a small casino there during World War II.
All right,
so it's okay. And it all started. It was there then, but it got, of course, much bigger after it grew to be monstrous after World War II. You know.
So again, this claim is no longer valid. Las Vegas is not America's fallout capital today.
Well, it was where the fallout came from, was next to Las Vegas. It's where many of the records are kept, and there's not any fallout there now, but it's where the fallout came from back in the 50s and 60s. And there were many air bursts and ground bursts, especially ground bursts there, that produce a lot of fallout. and we don't really know what the health consequences of those were. We do know that early tests produced burn marks on cattle as far away as southwestern Utah. In other words, there was a whole lot of radiation, and it was pretty powerful, and it was able to burn the hide of a cattle. You know?
Well, they gave you sunglasses, and they told you it was okay. I see the
Right.
pictures of all the people staring at the blast. They're all wearing sunglasses.
Right.
All righty.
Yeah, Atomic Veterans was a big cover-up. They spent billions of dollars covering that up rather than taking care of the veterans. Like Agent Orange is another one. There's a whole series of things. Now we get quality of care. All those things have been problems for decades, and they've never been taken care of properly.
All right, I'm going to switch and get everything here. We're switching out of atomic, and I assume when you write expose an evil industry, you're talking about finance.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, there was
what's going on?
Again.
Who brought down
Okay.
the New York Stock Exchange in 2008? You don't name them. Who were they?
Well, there were a group of people in New York that had a massive campaign for massive illegal negative stock shorting. This was headed by Michael Milken and his associates, including the Russian mafia. And our government and our media and so forth has been afraid to talk about it.
You're leaving up mortgages. The subprime business.
The subprime business was a major important aspect of this. What actually brought down the stock market in 2008 was this massive illegal negative stock shorting, and nothing was done to those people. There was no accountability. In fact, Michael Milken has a meeting every year with high-level government and private officials. He kind of has his own accolades that he works with that are very, very high level, includes the former Prime Minister of England and so forth. And but again, I think had there are many better ways that we could have resolved the many things that were wrong with the stock market and our financial system, rather than that crash. And many of the problems weren't solved. I mean, they were just kicked down the road. The banks that were responsible for it were refunded at the expense of the people.
Well, Lehman
and so
Brothers
forth.
and Bear Stearns don't exist anymore. So
Yeah, well, they went down that they were the sacrificial lambs, and there were a lot of things wrong with what they were doing. I'm not saying that they were right, but there should be a better way of handling these rather than crashing the whole economy. The world economy is not recovered.
Stearns, I want you to know. My cousin worked there, and a very close friend of mine, her father was CEO of Bear Stearns. It was way too big to fall. It was so powerful, a financial institute, and then the next day, I think some of it moved to Morgan Stanley or something, but it fell. A 57-story building didn't exist from one day to the next.
Right. Well, it was. I mean, there were a lot of things wrong with those two trading houses, but there should have been some better way of handling all this and some better way of fixing it up. And I don't think that they did make some improvements, but we're back almost to the situation it was in 2008. We could easily have another one of those crashes or more serious crash any time now.
I think we are in the midst. Look, if my listenership and readership are an indication, people are losing their shirts all over the place.
Well, it's now here's one for you.
Business. I traced it in an article, the connection between Soros and the Greek president, and you can actually connect the fall of Greece Oh, I won't go into source and CFR and all this baloney. It's not for me
Right.
to say.
Well, I'll bring one back to you that goes into ancient Israeli legend or ancient Jewish legend.
It's got to be because Soros is no friend of Israel's.
Well, no, it has nothing to do with Soros. It has to do with the 7-year cycle, something called Shemitah.
Shemitah,
yes. And Shemitah is coming up here in September 15th.
that means you don't, for 1 year, plant anything. It's called fallow. Shemitah means fallow. Where is this? All right, connected somehow.
Well, I've seen a recent report by some very impressive financial people about the 7-year cycle and the 49-year cycle.
By the way. I have to.
Yeah, and it's very impressive how it fits in with all these financial crises. You know.
I know what you're going to say, but I'm more interested. The world economy really has not recovered, and I'm more interested in Southern Europe. And it's not just Greece; it's Spain. They're in big trouble. Portugal's in big trouble. All of Southern Europe is in big trouble.
Right. Sure. Well, it's all these programs have been in place, and all these and there've been so many people that are not working. I mean, what is the unemployment rate in all those countries? At least 25%.
Yep.
Especially among the youth, or if it's not higher, and you can't have that in a modern democracy like those countries. Yeah.
Charles, we did a great interview. I'm glad you were here. Folks, this was Charles Stone. You know how to get a hold of him. Well, next interview is Michael Levine, also a fine interview. And as usual, I always say this, about 6 months ago, well, in the second hour, I don't talk as well as I should. They found lesions on my tongue. But
okay, thank you, Barry.
My mind is as good as ever. Thank you, Charles. Michael Levine coming up in 7. See you folks then.
Okay.
Bye.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit DiscountGoldandSilverTrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188. Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. The Air Force on Tuesday will put a 4-star general in charge of its nuclear force for the first time in the post-Cold War era. Sagar Magane reports.
The nuclear force has suffered through years of high-profile missteps and scandals.
It needs a fantastic leader.
And Air Force Secretary Deborah Lee James says General Robin Rand is the right guy to take over Global Strike Command.
I think he's just the ticket.
The change is part of overhauling the nuclear force and giving it more bureaucratic muscle. In a building full of senior officers, James says having a 4-star advocate is vital.
Rank does matter.
Rand is a career fighter pilot who has never served in the Nuclear Missile Corps or Strategic Bomber Force.
The first wife of convicted American-Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard is calling for the public to pressure American and Israeli officials to release him when his scheduled parole comes up this fall. More now from Voice of Israel's Ernie Singer in Jerusalem.
Hopes for Jonathan Pollard's release after nearly 30 years behind bars went up this weekend when U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch told the Aspen Security Forum that he would come up for mandatory parole, absent violations in addition to his life sentence for passing classified information to Israel. Interviewed by Voice of Israel's Jeremy Gimpel, Ann Pollard said she cannot celebrate until Jonathan is outside prison walls.
We've been in this position before where he's on the plane, the release is imminent, and nothing happens. At this point, he has no official notice of parole. And as long as he doesn't have an official notice, then that means he has no date or no time of release. So what we must pray for right now is that the parole board makes a positive decision and they agree to release him and they give him an immediate release date, or at least release him by November 21st, which would mark 30 years.
Hi, folks. Barry Chamish back for another good hour, I assure you. Look, Michael Levine is the guest. Now, officially, he's a police trials expert. But more to the point, he was a DEA agent in South America, and we will talk about that. But, Michael, you're there. I'm going to start easy. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Can you see
me? You wrote me that you said it ought to be fun. The so-called escape of Joaquin Shorty Guzman. What's so-called? He did escape.
Yeah, when I say so-called, of course, you have to go back. You know, I spent 10 years in deep cover assignments for DEA in South America, in Mexico. I lived in Argentina for 3 of those years. And what myself and other deep cover agents were able to document were the ties, the control of the Mexican government by the drug traffickers and the drug trafficking industry.
Okay.
And Joaquin is one of the top drug traffickers in the world. He's got the kind of power that can buy a country and then disappear in the country. If anyone in DEA who worked in Mexico knows that him being in jail there was a joke. The joke is, of course...
Oh, that was some escape. That was a very intense escape. If they wanted him... Look, I claim that when you have tunnels and you have railroads in the tunnels... Okay, where is he? If this was a so-called escape, where is he? Why can't he be imprisoned?
Well, he's a man who is worth billions. Where is he?
Yeah.
He is at this point wherever he wants to be. Now, what I predict, and it's going to come out, is he will be killed. He has to be killed because he's now made himself an embarrassment. It was when I was, as we reported in both my books, The Big White Lie and Deep Cover, which were both bestsellers, even in New York Times.
We're going to push them in 1 second.
Yeah, but
you're saying that Chapo Guzman was in these books?
No, the Mexican government was. I did a 15-ton cocaine deal with the Mexican military on camera. The videos were sent to the Attorney General of the United States by courier the very same night. Edwin Meese, who was then the Attorney General, then telephoned the Attorney General of Mexico and blew our cover. Now, that, in a New York Times bestseller, is about as libelous as you could get, and Edwin Meese sued everyone that he thought libeled him. And it doesn't get worse than what we put in a New York Times bestseller. But they didn't want to pursue it for one simple reason. I was a highly trained undercover agent, And I tape recorded everything that happened. The things I was witnessing had me in such a paranoid state that I began using my training against the people whom I refer to as the suits, the people who were pulling my strings. When I detect,
This reminds me of another quote. I'm not sure who Jose Gasser was, but you put 8 million for in a Miami vault for cocaine,
yeah,
and Pat Sullivan. I've never heard of him, but he was the assistant United States attorney. Went on. Uh, well, in short, you were not, how do we put this? He covered it up, all right, on behalf of Manuel Noriega.
yes.
Have I got this right? This is a very complicated story.
Oh, yes, it is. And basically, the way agencies like Central Intelligence and the State Department treat the public is pretty much like mushrooms. You keep them in the dark and you feed them, you know what? Start S dash dash T, and they count on the lack of intelligence of the American public to get away with just about anything. Now,
Well, you
people,
claim that Gasser was a CIA sub-agent. You're not,
not as
you're not dismissing this guy. You're saying he worked with the CIA, essentially.
no. What happened was I headed up a deep cover team beginning in Argentina, where I was living at the time. And we posed as an American mafia. I'm bilingual. I speak Spanish. I'm also conversant in Italian. So it worked very well for me.
Veni beri vrit. So we got 4 languages here.
Okay, you could have been great working with me, Barry.
Oh, pleasure. All right. Now,
So-
$8 million is a lot of money, and you're saying he was CIA. So all the charges were dropped by the assistant U.S. attorney. Very, very complicated. On behalf of Noriega, that brings up Iran-Contra.
No, not on behalf of Noriega. Not on behalf. The irony is that this is the prosecutor who claimed great fame by prosecuting Noriega. Noriega was put in there as pure irony. And
it was pretty ironic. All right.
yeah, he
Folks,
prosecuted
listeners, do our best.
Yeah.
We are talking about really strange corruption. You're talking about a corrupt CIA.
Well, they are. In fact, if you go on YouTube and you'll see under Michael Levine 53, there's a YouTube video of Judge Bonner, federal judge, who was the head of DEA, on 60 Minutes, and I was also on the same piece. But Judge Bonner looked at the camera and he told Mike Wallace, "There's no other way to put it. CIA are drug smugglers." So the point is, you don't have to believe Mike Levine. Believe the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration, who conducted, as they report on 60 Minutes, a secret investigation into 27 tons of cocaine smuggled into the U.S., 1 ton of which was seized in Miami in the hands of Central Intelligence assets, who Central Intelligence calls agents. Now, the CIA agent was the head of the Venezuelan National Guard.
Oh, gosh.
And now this is not me reporting it. I reported what
Venezuela.
Venezuelan National.
One more country.
Well, yeah, because if you think about it, cocaine is one of the most frequently sold cash items throughout the entire world. It's one of the biggest cash markets. Drugs in general is the biggest cash market. So you can't, it's a global economy. And when we're talking
it's more than that. When Guzman went to prison, gangs worldwide felt they could do whatever they wanted. He was kind of a controlling factor. Now he's back, supposedly. in the scene. It's very complicated.
Yeah, let me tell you what the mayor of Medellin, Colombia, told me 20. He told me 20 years ago that if you put every drug baron against the wall and machine gun them, there's 100 behind each one to take his place, and that's the truth. This is a multi-billion-dollar economy, close to $500 billion every year globally. Do you think?
And that's how the CIA funds itself.
Well, no, they don't fund themselves that way. What they do, and I first ran into this when I was working undercover for DEA in Southeast
By
Asia.
the way, for my poor listeners, I'm so sorry. It's so complicated. DEA is Drug Enforcement Authority.
No.
Am I right?
It's the Department of Justice, Drug Enforcement Administration.
Administration, okay.
I'm no longer with DEA, but we were considered a sister agency to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, where the DEA Academy is, in fact, at Quantico, sitting alongside of the FBI Academy. So it's all part of the Justice Department. The drug dealers call us all the letters, las letras. CIA, DEA, FBI, BATF. To them, it's just the letter. And one of the reasons, it's hard to tell you. One of the reasons I put this all in books that are based on tape-recorded conversations. Now, how else can you do that? I'm used to testifying as an expert on trial to this day on all police procedures. So I have to be very careful about my credibility. So the books, Deep Cover was a New York Times bestseller. The Big White Lie was a national bestseller. Wherever you see quotes, these are actual statements that are on tape. One of the reasons no one ever came after me is because they knew I had this whole thing on tape, and you didn't want somebody like me in court putting evidence that should indict people in CIA. Although I don't think they fear it anymore, because when Judge Bonner came out and called them drug traffickers, on 60 Minutes was enough to indict specific people for trafficking, specific officers in Central Intelligence for trafficking cocaine to their own country. But nothing was ever done. Now,
Look,
again,
I want to tell you something. I did not dive into Iran-Contra, but my very close friend and co-editor, Joel Boehnerman, did, and he died young. He had, without diving into it, very dangerous, very, very dangerous.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't go after Iran-Contra.
He wrote Crimes of a President. That was Bush's ties to Iran-Contra with Shimon Peres. It's a dirty, dirty, dirty world.
Dirty is very much an understatement, Barry.
I'm sorry to say you're right.
You know, my sainted father, who was not a sainted father, who was not a very nice guy, told me when I was a kid, he said, "You want to know what hell is? He says, hell is trying to be the only guy playing straight in a dirty card game." And the fact is that I often heard his words in my head when I was working undercover globally. Don't forget, I worked 25 years around the globe, and myself and other top-level DEA agents, including the Judge Bonner, the head of DEA, found ourselves, when we went too far, I put that in quotes, when we, in our undercover operations, began threatening drug traffickers like Guzman, who control countries, we were suddenly head-to-head against the CIA. Then strange things would happen. Now, you said CIA funds themselves. No, they don't. What they do, it started, I began working undercover in foreign posts all the way back during the Vietnam War. And this was all written in a book called Undercover by Donald Goddard. And during the Vietnam War, I was working undercover in Bangkok, in Thailand and Cambodia, making heroin buys. And this was the first time I ran into the CIA when they were protecting the source of the heroin that I was going after.
You're saying the Vietnam War was really to make a few guys really very rich on heroin?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that Congress refused to fund the Vietnam War at some point. And at that point, our allies in the Vietnam War, to fund themselves as our allies, they had one thing to sell: heroin. And it was commonly referred to by DEA agents, heroin, as the junkie tax. Congress wouldn't pay it, so the Central Intelligence assets were allowed to traffic heroin into the U.S. to fund themselves, and they were protected. And one of the cases that I ran that went right to the source of heroin in northern Thailand, I was stopped. And that was written about in one book, but there's going to be another book before I die, and I'm going to link it all together. But
I'm going to have to help you here. This is it's beyond difficult to follow. All right.
That's why
I'm going to try and make this easy to follow. And by the way, you don't know the name Victor Marchetti, do you?
Yeah, he came out and said pretty much what I'm saying.
He came out and killed my friend Joel Boehnerman.
Well, Victor Marchetti, I think, was the guy who made the statement that no president of the United States ever genuinely fought a war on drugs. If I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure where that fits. Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah. So, but that's why I urge people, if you're really interested, to go on michaellevinebooks.com. They're very cheap.
Spell Levine, it's got an E at the end.
Yeah, spell Levine. It's like Smith in Jewish, as my dearly sainted father would say. michaellevinebooks.com. And see for yourself. And then contact me. I'd be happy to talk to people, but I can't talk to people who don't try to educate themselves. That's impossible. So I know exactly what you're saying, Barry. I understand. But these are also adventures, too. I mean, if you look at the facts in The Big White Lie, the Drug Enforcement Administration teamed me undercover, posing as the lover of a woman named Sonia Atala.
Yes.
All
right, wait, I'm going to stop. You were a Jewish DEA agent assigned to Argentina when government death squads, well, quote, disappeared 25,000 Argentinian citizens. First of all, why? Why did they disappear them?
Well, very interesting. It was their method, the Argentine government's method, los desaparecidos is what they were called, the disappeared ones. And 25,000, I would say, is a minimum. Now, how they fought, there was they had a problem of terror, quote unquote terror, like us. Only their problem was, in fact, our problem here in the United States is probably about equal to what the problem was in Argentina. They blew up a few places, they killed a couple of people, but the Argentine government, the military government, reacted drastically. They began by arresting and interrogating anyone that had a reputation of being a leftist. These people were interrogated, and they were made to confess, or they confessed and out of fear named other people. Now, as they named people, these people started to disappear. And as the number of disappearances increased, what ironically happened is there were no more terror on the streets. Nothing. All the people who were politically active toward the left left the country. They fled the country. Now,
you're saying they were thrown out of planes, and unless they were super swimmers, that was their end.
Well, you know, again, in Big White Lie, I was assigned to work with the people doing the killing, and yeah, and that's the way I felt. I was in another world. You have to understand that I came from I grew up in the South Bronx. I began my career as a narcotic agent, making buys in the Bronx and Brooklyn, ounces and grams, and buying guns undercover, and I was transferred and promoted to Buenos Aires, Argentina. I began doing, when I got into the hard narcotic smuggling unit and other units, I suddenly began working at this elevated level. And really all I had was the fact that I was a good actor. I was fluent in Spanish.
You couldn't take an activist role. I assume it was an informational role.
No, I was undercover posing as a drug dealer. That's why you have to read the book. I was living with the drug traffickers. And
no,
when
I get that, but
Yeah.
you weren't acting against them. You were gathering info, I'm guessing.
No, I was acting against them. I was trying to take them down. I was trying to destroy them, set them up. The way that would happen is this. For instance, I met a guy named Pedro Castillo. The photo is in the book of him meeting me for the first time. He was the first emissary of an organization called La Mafia Cruceña, that is the Roberto Suarez organization. And when I met him on the streets of Buenos Aires, we did a 10 or a 20 kilo cocaine deal, and I arranged for him to deliver the drugs to me in Miami, where he sent couriers. And some of the couriers, by the way, didn't know they were even carrying drugs. They're what we commonly call as blind mules, and they were all arrested in Miami. The Roberto Suarez case, which was the biggest case in our history at that time,
That was a Bolivian, not an Argentinian. Look, I'm doing my best with you, but he was the Bolivian cocaine cartel.
Yeah, but if you read the book, you'll see that we met in Argentina.
Okay.
There were death contracts for me in Bolivia. So the first meeting, I met the Minister of Interior of Bolivia, whose name was Ibanez, and we met in downtown Buenos Aires, and we talked the deal. We talked about doing 1,000 kilos of cocaine, which was the biggest seizure in our history at that point was by a Border Patrol agent who seized 200 kilos of cocaine. When I wrote the cable, and the cable is in the book, to DEA saying that there's a man named Roberto Suarez who wants to deal thousands of kilos a month, they said he's not in our computer. He's not in the file. We don't know who he is. I wasn't even authorized to continue working him. Then I got more information, and I was finally told, go ahead, but we're not funding any money on this investigation. 4 months later.
You're saying Suarez controlled 90% of the world's cocaine production. Why wasn't he in a computer?
It's a good question, and that's why I wrote the book. Let the American people ask, why was he not in the computer? Of course, later, the information I got was it's because he was protected by Central Intelligence. He was a source of anti-communist funding for South America, when our Congress weren't even allowed to know what Central Intelligence was doing. By the way, they would later admit to this in testimony before the Senate. What the hell?
No, don't worry about it. Just
Anyway,
it's tough enough without you looking for sources.
No, I'm not looking for sources. My screen just went black.
Okay. All right. Now,
the thing about it is, I didn't know he was responsible for 90% of cocaine, or 90% of the cocaine on the Earth's surface, not until Felix Milian Rodriguez, who was the Colombian cartel money launderer, who was arrested and convicted for laundering $1 billion. He, from jail, decided he would talk to the Senate, Congress. I got hold, through some attorneys, of his testimony, which was, thanks to Senator Kerry, classified. Every American should read this, but I got hold.
Senator Kerry again?
Yeah, well, the Kerry Commission was investigating the so-called Iran-Contra. And what Milian Rodriguez said is the following, and I have the transcript to back my words up. He said, Number one, he was asked by our congressmen, our senators, who is the biggest drug trafficker alive? And he said without hesitation, Roberto Suarez. Roberto Suarez is responsible for 90% of the cocaine on the world's surface.
I'm going to add, Iran-Contra saw a ton of cocaine going through a place called Mena, Arkansas, thanks to Bill Clinton, governor at the time. Look, this story you're telling is, is it?
You know, I wouldn't even say...
It's a different world?
Well, it's a different world.
Oh, we have to take 3 minutes off. Michael, honest, I'm following you. I'm doing my best. We'll be back in 3 minutes, and we'll get your story done one way or another. Folks, this is Barry Chamish. See you in 3.
Thanks.
I pledge allegiance to the King of Kings, and to his kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. One holy nation, under our Heavenly Father, grace, mercy, justice for all.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Hi, folks. Another great show, but very, very tough to follow. All right. Look, you get all my books at lulu.com, www.lulu.com, right in my last name in the search box, CHAMISH. And my website is barrychamish.com. One last chance for you. Michael, plug yourself.
Anyone who feels at all confused, I don't really blame you, because I'm trying to give you about 25 years of a life of an undercover agent.
I'm doing it. I'm sorting it out. We're getting there.
Okay, if you are confused, I urge you first go on YouTube. My channel is Michael Levine 53. There you will see the head of
Levine with an E at the end.
Right, Michael Levine 53. You will see Judge Bonner, the head of DEA, calling Central Intelligence drug traffickers. And when he's talking about a case that the Drug Enforcement Administration, my colleagues and myself investigated, that is so much bigger than MENA. It's ridiculous. We're talking about 20.
That was pretty big.
That was
that was.
I assure you, I lived a life investigating and living with drug traffickers. It's nothing compared to what's alleged in MENA. 27 tons of cocaine coming into the U.S. at the hands of one of your agencies, while the American people are taxed $1 trillion since the naming of this as a war on drugs. Is
that agency is the CIA, by the way.
Yes.
Hey.
And you will see on this YouTube, you'll see an Inside Edition thing that I did with Bill, I forget his name, an Inside Edition piece that I did where they used video of me sitting down at a table dealing with the Mexican military for transacting a 15-ton cocaine transaction, with the cocaine coming from Bolivia through Mexico into the U.S. with the aid of the Mexican military. And you'll see the actual transaction. And you can see me dealing with a man who's wearing a Mexican colonel's uniform. And that man is Colonel Jaime Carranza, who happened to be the grandson of the president of Mexico. We were dealing with the Mexican government for cocaine. Not only cocaine, any drugs that we could go through. If you set up a deal with the Mexican government, then they open the door into the U.S. for you. Trouble with that was that those negotiations were going off. What you see on TV was happening while we were negotiating for NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. Our case had to be killed, because if the truth of that case hit the news, there's no way North American Free Trade Agreement would have ever passed.
Well, it means the cocaine wouldn't be taxed.
Well, that's not quite all there is to it. There was great...
I gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, play ball with me. There's a logic in my thinking. Look, I started writing about Mengele living openly in Argentina. That's not true. He was captured and died in Bolivia. Now we're going to go into Bolivia. All right, who was Sonia Atala?
Sonia Atala.
Atala.
Sonia Atala she worked for the Bolivian government, actually making cocaine raw base. You have to understand, in those years, in the 80s, all the cocaine that came through Colombia started in Bolivia, because Bolivia made was called pasta básica. That's cocaine base, and the cocaine base was sold to the Colombians and converted to cocaine hydrochloride and then sent up to the U.S. At that point, if you put Bolivia out of business, you put Colombia out of business. Well, Sonia Atala was named the Queen of Cocaine by the notorious Pablo Escobar. So my point when I wrote the book, The Big Fight...
Why was she named the Queen of Cocaine?
He named her the Queen of Cocaine because she was his source. If you put Sonia Atala out of business, you put Pablo Escobar out of business. But yet, Sonia Atala became a Central Intelligence asset. And she and I working for the Drug Enforcement Administration, posing as Mr. Big and Sonia's boyfriend, took over a huge debt that she had with the Colombians. And we began living together as boyfriend and girlfriend and having this is the story of the Big White Lie. And we were targeting the man they called the Minister of Cocaine, the Minister of Interior of Bolivia at that time. Now, Mengele, by the way, again, it's in the Big White Lie. When I first was stationed in Buenos Aires back in 1978, the police, the Argentine secret police, what they called the milicos, the Argentine police who were doing those desaparecidos, they were killing people. They used to joke with me, and they would say, because they knew I'm a Jew, so they would say, you want to come and see Mengele's apartment. Mengele had an apartment in Argentina, no matter where he lived. He was actually living, I think, most of the time in Brazil, but he still had a place in Buenos Aires that he came to. And he wasn't alone. There were quite a few. My house, when I lived in Argentina, was about 8 blocks from where Eichmann lived. And there was a big community of escaped Nazis living there. Now, when I tried to contact the Department of Justice section that was looking for these people, they virtually ignored me. What I said was, hey, I've got Argentine cops who said they'll happily take me to the apartment of Mengele, Joseph Mengele. And I didn't doubt them, but it was, I was suddenly catapulted from the streets of New York to this strange world that was deadly and scary. And it took me some period of time to understand how really dangerous the job I had taken really was. This job, and when I did,
I say from personal experience, it's amazing. I'm talking to you.
Yes, it is. It really is. I'm probably one of the luckiest men you've ever met.
Had to be.
Yeah.
Now, Sonia Tala, let's get back to Operation Hun.
Yeah.
Now, this is for the DEA. If she's selling all this cocaine, and she's called the Queen of Cocaine, how was she working for the DEA on their Operation Hun? Sort that one out, will ya?
Sure. Sonia had made a cocaine. She was making lots of cocaine deals. She was taking the cocaine and the cocaine base right from the Bolivian government warehouse where it was stored. And she was making deals, literally working for Luis Arce Gomez, who would later be named the Minister of Cocaine. Now,
there was a Minister of Cocaine for real?
He was called that by DEA.
Oh.
We named him the Minister of Cocaine because we knew what he was doing, and yet he was running the State Department.
His assistant was the Minister of Crack.
Well, that was yet to come. The funny thing is that, again, I wrote this in The Big White Lie, working undercover with Sonia, she described crack to me before it got to the U.S. They used to call it pichicata. And the kids on the streets of Santa Cruz, Bolivia, were already smoking pichicata, which was cocaine base. And she told me how incredibly addictive it was. And I wrote a report to DEA, and I said, this is going to hit the streets of America. Now, I wrote that report in 1981. And sure enough, crack cocaine was soon to follow. But Sonia was at the cutting edge of the cocaine world. Now, what Sonia did, she made a cocaine deal with a man by the name of Octavio Mejia. Octavio Mejia was a brutal killer, a cartel leader. He was responsible for a lot of the deaths in Miami during what they call the Cocaine Cowboy Wars. Anybody who knows that period of time will know who Octavio Mejia was. Now, for reasons that we were never sure of, Sonia was a very extremely beautiful woman. And
Is she still alive, by the way?
She is, and she's still under witness protection. I have a photo of her in my book with her face blacked out. And
gotcha. It's also on the internet, the picture of you with her.
Yeah, and she reached the top of the drug world by her intelligence and her ability to manipulate men, not go to bed with them. She was very sharp, incredibly sharp. No, but what happened to her was that she suddenly got on somebody's S list in the Bolivian government. We believe it was Luis Arce Gomez, the head of the government himself. She had gotten too powerful. He wanted her out. So the way her cocaine trafficking would work is she would get paid from the Colombians, in this case, Octavio Mejia, and he paid her, I think, $1 million out front or $2 million out front for a shipment of cocaine that was due to arrive in Colombia. Well, Luis Arce Gomez, the man holding the cocaine warehouse in Bolivia under lock and key, refused to deliver the drugs. We are never sure.
Another shift in the story. And what was your reaction? I assume...
Well, I didn't know any of this until I met Sonia.
Okay.
When I met Sonia, I had just been transferred from Bolivia to Washington, D.C. DEA headquarters under investigation. That's a whole other... You have to read the book, The Big White Lie, to understand all of this. But while I'm there in Washington, they asked me to play an undercover role in something called Operation Hun. Hun, because her name was Atala, sounded so much like Attila. That's one of the...
I get the pun.
So that's what they call the Operation Hun, because she was the leading force in it. But you needed a DEA agent to work undercover with her in order to both protect her and to perfect the case. Now, why did she go to DEA? Well, very, very simply, once she didn't deliver the cocaine to Papo Mejia, this is a man who killed more people than AIDS, and that's he was bad. He's as bad as ISIS now. The only difference between a guy like Papo Mejia and ISIS is he didn't want to die. He just wanted to kill.
Well, then how did you protect her?
Well, let me finish the story and you'll see.
All right.
So the idea was, and this was my idea, is that we call we get word to Papo Mejia that Sonia wants to pay her debt. She's in hiding. And she's, again, in business with her lover, Luis Miguel Garcia, which was my undercover role. So basically, I then, as her lover, I took responsibility for the money she owed. And I wanted to negotiate with his people for not only the cocaine that she owed him, but for additional drug trafficking, additional amounts of cocaine. And therein began Operation Hun, that had her and I posing as lovers and major drug traffickers living in our house, and the case was successful.
Did the cocaine make it to America? Did it hit the streets?
So many tons of cocaine made it to America. I wouldn't even know where to begin to tell you. If you look at Deep Cover, we in the book Deep Cover, I negotiated for 15 tons of cocaine with Bolivians and Mexicans and a money launderer in Panama who happened to be Manuel Noriega's money launderer.
How did that make a crime disappear? It sounds like you're making it better.
Well, you know what? It certainly, the war on drugs certainly did not make anything disappear. If that's what you're saying, I couldn't agree with you more. What I try to show is exactly what a lot of DEA people are now saying. It was never real. We were thwarted. The Drug Enforcement Administration was thwarted at every corner. 3
By
years
who?
By Central Intelligence, mainly. We were threatening Central Intelligence assets who happened to be major drug dealers.
Wait, you weren't working together? Were you supposed to be working together?
Well, the first one to order Central Intelligence to work with us, order them, was President Carter. And I write about this in the book, that just for the hell of it, I asked to borrow a camera for an undercover meet in Buenos Aires, and Central Intelligence didn't have a camera. That was after they'd been ordered to work with us. It was a joke, and the only people who were not let in on the joke were the American people paying for this whole madness.
Well, apparently also not the Bolivian people. Now, I'm quoting you here. This is Operation Fast and Furious.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was the CIA's plot to overthrow the Bolivian government.
No.
First of all, expand on that a bit, will you please?
No, Barry. Fast and
Then
Furious.
correct me.
Sure. Fast and Furious was a Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms undercover operation. You call it a reverse sting, where they actually gave guns to Mexican cartel killers. They let them come into the U.S., buy guns with fake IDs, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the agency that was paid to get guns off the street, put 2,500 guns into the hands of killers. The idea was to perfect gun cases. It's kind of like I give you a gun and I want to see what you do with it and then arrest you for doing what you do with it.
I don't get that. I honestly don't get that. You're saying that essentially they were trapped into doing something illegal, and I'm lost. Help.
Well, the gun laws indicate that if you take a gun across state lines, across national lines, and you use it in a crime, you're committing another federal felony. So the dimwits, the Keystone cops in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms came up with this wackadoo plan that you or anyone who's an expert in this business cannot understand. Because the first question you ask is, well, okay, you're going to give them a gun to see if they commit a crime with it. How are you going to stop them from killing people? Well, the answer.
All right. Good question.
The answer is you don't.
Blanks.
And some of those guns were used on American border agents, killed them. Some of those guns were used in massacres in Mexico. Those guns are still out there being used all the time. Now, when people like me said you should indict these idiots for ever coming with this malevolently reckless idea, which is so bizarre, to putting U.S. government money and agents all into giving guns to drug traffickers and killers, you belong behind bars yourself. Well, it became, quote unquote, political. Anybody who said that, because don't forget, this was authorized by the head of the Justice Department, the Obama Justice Department. So suddenly, if you, like me, I'm not political at all. I just wanted these people to go to jail where they belong.
Obama? You're saying Obama, the current...
Not Obama himself, the head of the Obama Justice Department, the Attorney General. And the Attorney General at some... Holder. Just go Google Fast and Furious.
I know who. I know... Oh, gosh. Okay.
So you'll get like 1,000 articles. Well, I was one of those... I'm a firearms expert. I was a BATF agent. I worked undercover. I was the first BATF agent to penetrate and live with motorcycle gangs in Buffalo, New York. Again, this was written up in a book, Undercover, by Donald Goddard. It's the whole idea. Fast and Furious was an amazing debacle. The guns are out there, still killing to this day. And no one in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms or the Justice Department who authorized this insane operation has paid any penalty whatsoever. And it makes, quite frankly, as a career law enforcement officer, and I still am involved in law enforcement to this day as a police instructor, I find that nauseating. And the way the people got away with it was very simply, it became political. If you went after Fast and Furious, you were anti-Obama, which I'm not. I'm
anti-Obama. Again, the operation was anti-Holder, maybe.
No, Holder didn't invent it. Holder approved it. He authorized it. And then there's a lot of evidence that he covered it up. He covered up his role in it. Or he covered up the Department of Justice role in it. Now, there's a lot of, all I wanted to do, to effect, as a journalist, all I wanted to effect was that this be examined, as all the cases I've ever been involved in, by a grand jury of Americans. A grand jury.
Obama knew that these guns were going to kill many tens of thousands of Mexicans.
No,
and he
that's
approved
not
it?
what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. Absolutely not what I'm saying. Obama had no idea
I'm
about
doing my best. So what are you saying?
I'm saying that it happened under his administration, and
Okay.
and it had to be
And he
ratified.
would have had to
It had to
approve
be
it.
ratified by the Justice Department under Holder. That when the guns were already given away, and the guns were already killing people, including 2 U.S. Border Patrol agents, that's the first Obama heard of. He wasn't responsible for it.
All
But
right.
that's what the facts indicate. And I stick to facts. When I see evidence, I see enough evidence. I've testified before hundreds of grand juries in my life and indicted thousands and thousands of people for crimes including gun trafficking. And that what I see was more than enough to indict and charge people with a reckless indifference to human life, which is manslaughter. The people who put those guns on the street should be tried for manslaughter.
Look, I want to say in my defense, even you, in what you sent me, proved I'm not the only one confused by the story. Now, Evo Morales, he's the president of Bolivia, cited your book as the reason he booted the DEA out of his country because it was manipulating his government. And you corrected him and said, no, you read it wrong. The DEA are good guys. The CIA should be thrown out. Now, come on, this is a very messy conclusion and story, right?
No, if you read the book, you'll see it very clearly. As a matter of fact, I just heard from a Bolivian journalist. But the Big White Lie is now all of a sudden making very big news in Europe. I'll explain that after. But
go ahead.
Yeah, and I took part in a documentary about the involvement of Klaus Barbie with the Bolivian.
Klaus Barbie was a very famous Nazi. I believe he lived where, in Colombia or somewhere?
He lived in Bolivia.
Bolivia.
And he.
All right. Now, what was his role in the cocaine empire?
Well, he was security. He was key in the overthrow of the Bolivian government by drug dealers. In fact, the State Department said this is.
Was Evo Morales one of them?
No, Evo Morales is the president of Bolivia now. He might have been a 2-year-old when this all happened.
All right.
Evo Morales, whom I met in Paris, he was the head of coca leaf unions. He became the president of Bolivia. I've met him. He's a decent guy. In the book, I made it clear that DEA was working very closely with the Bolivian government to defeat the drug traffickers in their country. That Central Intelligence came in and supported the drug traffickers, not only in defeating DEA, but in overthrowing.
Well, who do you trust then? If you're a leader in Bolivia, you've got two contradictory policies going on here. Which one do you choose?
Well, I just recently got emails from Bolivian journalists, some of whom just saw copies of this documentary that's coming out, and they congratulated. They said, congratulations on your career. You're right. DEA in those years was really trying to do their job, working with the Bolivian government. It was Central Intelligence that came in and betrayed us all. When I say betrayed us all, betrayed the American and the Bolivian people, because Central Intelligence helped the Suarez organization, then called La Mafia Cruceña, to overthrow the Bolivian government. That was, as the State Department was quoted as saying, this is the first time in our history that drug traffickers took over a democratic nation. This is the first time. Now, how did that happen? Central Intelligence. Now, key to that was Klaus Barbie.
Oh, gosh. Michael, I hate to do this. We had a very good interview. I think I helped a bit. It is a tricky story you've got, all right?
Sure.
Thank you for being on the show. I hope I did you well. You did fine.
Thanks a lot, my friend. Good luck.
We will be in contact. Folks, that was Michael Levine with an E at the end. This is Barry Chamish. I'll see you next Tuesday. I'm going to relax. All right, that was a complicated interview. Night all.
If you'd like to get a copy of this program, you may subscribe at FirstAmendmentRadio.com for only $45 a month, and you'll receive an MP3 CD weekly of all of our programs. As a bonus, we'll send you a password for our audio archives online. That's a $15 value. Or you may request any month of any program on one MP3 CD for a minimum donation of only $25, or any single program on tape, MP3 CD, or CD for only $15. You may do all of this online at FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Just follow the instructions to make a donation or subscribe. You may also adopt an hour of your favorite program. Please don't forget that most of the programs on FirstAmendmentRadio.com are listener-supported. Don't do internet? Then call 559-781-3773 and we'll be honored to help you. Thank you from all of us here at FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is end-time newsman Rick